5 years. It's a long time to wait for a record, no matter who it is. Whenever we've talked about some of the greats, we've mentioned the length of time between albums, and this is by far not anywhere near some of the longest waits that we've had to suffer through. Think about Carcass with Surgical Steel. That was one that almost was 2 decades for us to wait for a new release from that band. So with Iron Maiden in the Book of Souls, not only do we get a new Maiden record after 5 years, which is the longest period between albums that the band has ever had, but they actually give us a little something more considering we have waited that long, and that's a double album, 92 minutes and 11 seconds of new Iron Maiden. And here's something else, another prime stat that you should probably think about and crunch the numbers in your head at home, and that's the fact that there's only 11 tracks on this album. So yeah, if you crunch the numbers, if you do the math, you realize that there are a couple tracks on this disc that are really, really freaking long. And yeah, that's absolutely true. We have one that's 13:33, another one that's 10:29, and the Mammoth Empire of the Clouds, which finishes this disc at 18:03. 5 years in the making, here we are, Iron Maiden, the Book of Souls. The time has come, the time is now. Your time is up, John Cena. You can't see me. So Iron Maiden, what can be said? We've already spoken about Speed of Light. We talked about how youthful the band still sounds, even if perhaps their voices are getting a little bit older, and they themselves are getting a little bit older. They have a little bit of that fire and character from the 1980s that really has kind of surfaced over here to 2015, and this is present on this song principally because it's a shorter one on this disc. This is at 5:01, one of the shortest songs on this album, and it's conveniently placed on disc number 1. That's right, we need to talk about 2 different discs. How are we going to do this? We'll go one at a time is what we'll do. So the first disc is the first 6 songs on the album. It starts with If Eternity Should Fall and ends with The Book of Souls. That's the self-titled track on this album. The highlights of this disc are just based around the fact that this is a group in Iron Maiden that has reinvented themselves even a little bit further than they have on the previous album. They've brought in some of those old style influences from the 1980s, some of those familiar gallops that you're very, very used to, but at the same time, it's a new age. It's 2015. This is a group that now almost teeters on the line of the new wave of British heavy metal / progressive metal in some ways. 3 guitar players and just a bevy of different abilities that the band possesses. But the first thing that will really spark the imagination is the very first track of Eternity Should Fall. The introduction kind of gives you a little bit of shades of a continuation of The Final Frontier. If you remember the opening number from that song, it was one that gave it a very spacey, a very airy appeal to it. Now, this one sort of has that same feeling, but it's also based a little bit around the title itself and the concept of a Book of Souls and the Mayan civilization, which has no Book of Souls, but speaks heavily about the concept of the afterlife and death. This is not a concept album, but it has a couple of interweaving tendencies, a couple of things that are mentioned quite often. Now, for an introduction, an introductory track, If Eternity Should Fall is extremely strong. It showcases Iron Maiden's continuing ability to not only build a successful rhythm and build a successful structured song, but also still captivate whenever it comes to bridges and choruses, keeping people wanting to remain on their feet with horns high up in the air during the live setting, but also whenever you're sitting down, you can't help but bang your head a little bit and just really rock out in whatever location that you're in, along with the music. But then we move a couple tracks further into the red and the black, and the very first thing that you're going to think about is at 13:33, this is probably like the second longest Iron Maiden song, or perhaps the third. I think it's the third. Well, not anymore. But you're going to get an instant memory of Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Now, we're going to be doing this twice throughout this review. Before you get this concept in your head that Iron Maiden have run out of ideas, and that Iron Maiden now needs to sort of recycle some of their old material in order to craft a long album such as this one, get that out of your skull immediately. The principal reason why is because introductory or whatever, this is like Rime of the Ancient Mariner because of the gallop that's behind it, because of that familiar idea throughout its first half of just a tremendous, tremendous gallop that is provided by Harris and the boys, with Bruce's vocals providing the key to the story, and then letting the musicians handle the second half of this song. And the solos on this are absolutely incredible. If there is one thing that will be praised this early on in the review, is the fact that the musicianship and the soloing on this album are out of this world. It's almost ungodly what Iron Maiden have been able to produce on this disc, almost as though they knew the importance behind it, almost as though they knew that Bruce was going to have to handle getting a tumor removed, and Steve Harris was going to have to handle dealing with the deaths of two people very close to him, which actually stymied his creative abilities. He doesn't have a writing credit on this album, which seems absurd. It's like they knew, and they brought their A game, and then said, screw that, that's not enough, here's my fucking A+ game. This track is what sets up pretty much the entirety of this experience. Even though there are 4 tracks in and you're already getting a nice feel of it, those 10-minute tracks plus, I know, worry a lot of people. This should set your mind at ease. And then going into the very final track, track number 6, after passing through When the River Runs Deep, the Book of Souls ends disc 1 on a triumphant note. And it's one that really showcases Maiden's ability to flip-flop between their softer side and their heavy, heavy side. Now, whenever we move into disc 2 with Death or Glory, this is a track that was written with the idea of singles in mind, and the Speed of Light was written kind of in the same vein. The band was looking actually at tracks such as Can I Play With Madness and 2 Minutes to Midnight whenever looking at not only inspiration for these tracks, but also looking at structural inspiration, which certainly seems achieved. This is a great track to start off disc number 2, especially considering the mammoth that is lurking at the very, very end. So whenever you look at the structure here, disc number 1 has 2 10-minute plus tracks wrapped up. In fact, it seems to be more of the longer disc out of the 2 of them. And then whenever you get to the second disc of this album, you have 5 minutes, 7 minutes, nearly 5 minutes, 6.5 minutes, and then 18. So you have to balance it somehow. Now remember what I said about Rime and the Ancient Mariner? Shadows of the Valley remind me of the evil that men do in their introduction. That introduction is almost spot on. It's almost exact. And I'll tell you one thing, The Evil That Men Do is a phenomenal song. This one does not have that same addicting quality, but it handles things a little bit differently. The introduction just serves there as exactly that, and then launches into its own idea. And it actually works very nicely. This is almost like if The Evil That Men Do had a sister song, or a companion song, or a part 2. It's a very, very nice idea, and I strongly suggest that you check it out before passing judgment. But I have to actually skip over the Man of Sorrows, which we're heading toward Empire of the Clouds. I have a lot to say about that, but before that, I have to mention very briefly Tears of a Clown. This is a song that it's been publicized is about the late and the great Robin Williams, and while this isn't a song that is a ballad by any stretch of the imagination, the lyricism coupled with the music, not to mention the memories that you feel if you happen to be a Robin Williams fan or even respected the man, even without being a fan, is enough to really bring some sadness to your eye, to some sorrow to your eye. This is just a heartbreaking and heartwarming track at the same time, considering this isn't something that you see all of that often, not in this sort of reflective rest-in-peace capacity. This is instead something that in music is typically reserved for fellow musicians that have passed. Either that, or it's not something that is as directly known as this one has become. This has become a very publicly known sentiment. But then we make it to Empire of the Clouds. This is a song that is all about a fabled airship from the 1930s in England, the R-101, I believe, which unfortunately during its maiden voyage went down, and perhaps went down based around its creator's own hubris. This is making history for Iron Maiden fans considering its 18-minute runtime. It's also making history because of Bruce Dickinson playing the piano on this track, and it is actually one of the cornerstone aspects and the cornerstone pieces of this puzzle. Considering for the first 7 minutes you have Bruce Dickinson's piano playing offset with just light sounds from the band, and then also on top of that, he is telling the story as this is going on, and it is an absolute beauty that is also interlaced and interwoven with a little bit of that anxiety, a little bit of that fear. You can tell just by the narrative, by the lyricism, that this is an airship, this is a vessel that is destined for doom. Then you enter into the second half of this song, which is about 7 minutes by itself, which really is characterized and accented by the music by itself. It is more of a musician's passage, and it's one that certainly showcases a lot of turmoil. It showcases a lot of problems going on. You can almost see and hear this as the soundtrack to the flight itself starting to take a sour turn and go down. It's really a great cinematic style adventure once you read about the vessel itself and then listen to the song. After you get through this captivating 7 minutes of music, we return to that original idea. We return to Bruce's voice. We return to the piano tracks with the band purveying in the background, and we get the final 4 minutes, which tells the unfortunate fate of the Empire of the Clouds. First of all, if this were to be the last ever Iron Maiden album, Empire of the Clouds is the perfect way for them to call it a career. You can call it a career with your longest song, your biggest song, and probably one of the best. Absolutely one of the best. This is one that tugs on multiple emotions as opposed to just being a headbanger. And that's what you kind of want with an 18-minute long song. You can't have just an 18-minute long thrash fest and expect to have the same energy you did at minute 1 during minute 18. Eventually you have to have a little bit of deviation. Not having much in the way of structural deviation only works for drone and stoner metal. And even that needs a little bit of deviation, like a second note. That's just the jab. Whew. 92 minutes of music, 2 discs, including an 18-minute long mammoth finale. How does this size up? How does this not only size up within 2015, but how does this size up within the Iron Maiden discography itself? Let me tell you exactly how it sizes up. This is by far, bar none, probably the second best Iron Maiden album of all time. Behind only Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, which is a masterpiece. An absolute masterpiece, probably untouchable, but the Book of Souls comes close. It dethrones Brave New World. It dethrones Number of the Beast. It dethrones POWERSLAVE, Peace of Mind. It dethrones anything else that you might imagine to hold the silver medal slot. This is a phenomenal disc. The 92-minute runtime is not wasted whatsoever. This is instead a disc where Iron Maiden somehow find a way not only to fill all of that space, but fill it with quality A+ music and keep you engaged within this disc and not have you get lost within the shuffle. Some people may say that they go a little bit too far with some of the instrumentalization. I say phooey on that. It helps to build the overall atmosphere and helps to build the overall meaning behind every single song. Nothing is wasted here. They picked up Steve Harris, who wasn't able to contribute as much creatively. They picked up Bruce Dickinson, who had to deal with cancer. They picked up each other on this album, embraced more of a live setting, embraced a lot of first takes being included in the final product, and look at what was delivered. Absolute majesty, absolute brilliance, absolute genius. Holy shit. And now comes the part where 2015 decides to get really, really hard. It happened again. Hand Cannot Erase is not alone. 100 out of 100. Perfect score, Book of Souls. You may say I'm biased because I'm a Maiden fan. No, I'm not. Listen to the record. If you still say it's nothing short of a masterpiece, there's a good chance that you're saying that just to be rebellious against my words. And if that's all that you're about, if that's all your frame of mind is, buddy, then that's your problem, not mine. This is an amazing piece of work that needs to be listened to, not only by Iron Maiden fans, but by heavy metal fans. This is one that is not to be missed. But I know I'm not the only one that's heard this mammoth already. I know that I am not alone. I don't stand alone in this. I want to know what you think about the Book of Souls by Iron Maiden. I want to know what you think about this album. Is this a masterpiece? Does this compare with their pantheon of greats throughout their 30, 40 plus years, however long it's been? I can't do math right now. How does this compare to their other albums? And how does this compare here in 2015? Let me know in the comments below. I'm coverkillernation and goddammit, I'm hyped. September the 4th. This should be the biggest album in the world. Make it happen.